We stay in Eastern Europe, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte paid tribute to fallen soldiers in Kyiv today. The two leaders carried out candles to a memorial and observed a moment of silence as an air raid siren sounded across the city. Mark Rutte said that reaching a peace deal to end Russia's war would require difficult decisions. He also highlighted that the Pearl weapons purchasing program supplies 90% of Ukraine's air defense missiles. The visit follows a night of heavy attacks by Russia, which launched over 450 drones and more than 60 missiles. Last week, Russia and Ukraine paused strikes on each other's energy infrastructure, though both sides remain at odds over the timeframe of the truce. Gilbert Doctorow joins us once again here. Zelenskyy and Rutte in Kyiv, a spectacle there in front of media cameras, just a day ahead of these trilateral talks between the United States, Ukraine and Russia. How will Moscow be viewing the NATO Secretary General in Kyiv today?
With scorn and disregard. This is another public relations stunt in Kyiv. It has no impact whatever on the reality on the ground, where the Russians keep advancing, or on the reality at the negotiating table, where we have every reason to believe that the Ukrainian side is discussing with the United States, with Mr. Witkoff, and with the Russian negotiators, security issues surrounding the evacuation, the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Donbass. Mr. Zelenskyy can say what he likes. It's all to keep his enemies at home at bay. But the reality is the Ukrainians officially are recognizing they lost the war. This past Sunday, when Russian television interviewed the head of the Russian delegation to these talks, who was the chief of military intelligence in Russia, they asked him how the talks going. And he said, well, as regards my team, we're in good spirits. And the Ukrainian team seems to be very sad. I think that tells you the story. They're not talking about American security guarantees for Kyiv. They're talking about the Ukrainians essentially accepting Russia's peace terms.
Gilbert, but of course, NATO is still supplying the vast majority of Ukraine's air defense missiles and defensive weaponry. Can Russia still pretend this is a proxy conflict, or is it already a de facto war with a Western alliance?
Oh, it has been. This goes back to the summer of last year. Mr. Putin's statements regarding the long-range missiles and the intervention that's supplied by the West, and the intervention generally of American and NATO suppliers and directors of the drone strikes and other offensive actions by Ukraine against Russia, that these made them effectively co-belligerents. However, it was in the interest of Russia not to pursue that to its logical conclusion, which would be a declaration of war on the United States and NATO. It did not do that because that would seriously escalate the conflict in a way that could be uncontrollable and unforeseeable. So they have held back. But as to the reasons, the justification, casus belli, Mr. Putin made it very clear. It's all there for everyone to see. So it is effectively a direct NATO-Russia war, though not de jure.
Dr. Doctorow, do stay with us as we move on to our next story and to a related development. Ukrainians are skeptical of the energy ceasefire as Russian strikes hit their homes. The 4-day pause ended on February the 2nd when Russia launched a massive wave of missiles and drones targeting Kyiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Zaporizhzhia and Odessa, plunging thousands of homes into darkness. Temperatures in Kyiv fell below minus 24 degrees Celsius overnight, worsening the humanitarian situation as residents sought shelter. Critical energy facilities, including the Darniska thermal plant and key 750 kV substations, were hit, whilst missile strikes also caused power outages across Kyiv and other regions. The renewed attacks followed the temporary halt requested by US President Donald Trump, which ended the February the 1st, as the Kremlin targets Ukraine's energy infrastructure despite ongoing peace talks. Dr. Doctorow, after the 4-day pause followed by massive strikes, can any future limited ceasefire with Russia be taken seriously without binding verification methods going into these peace talks once again?
Well, the Russians have no interest in temporary ceasefires or even permanent ceasefires if they are not part and parcel of an overall agreement on the peace. So there's no surprise there that they acceded to a temporary halt in attacks on energy infrastructure. That was a gesture, a token of goodwill to Mr. Trump. It was nothing more than that. And Mr. Putin would come under severe attack by his patriots in Russia if he even thought of agreeing to something more substantial in the interests of the Ukrainian side. We are in endgame. The end of this war is in sight. The end of the war, from the Russian perspective, is their victory, and they will not do anything to prevent it going through to conclusion. So I wouldn't look for the ceasefires. They will not change anything. And the attacks on the energy infrastructure are not to make Ukrainians suffer in their apartments without water or heat or electricity. It is to get them to move out of the country and to come to Germany and create havoc in Central Europe, forcing Europe to change its mind about how good the war is.
Gilbert Doctorow, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to talk to you as always.